The Sins of the Fathers. By Charles Mungoshi, Zimbabwe. Everyone had gone and they were now alone. Rondo Rwafa and his father, the ex-minister. Unknown to the father, the son who had never handled a gun before had one in the inside pocket of his jacket. By the end of the day, he would shoot or not shoot his father. They were sitting at the dying fire under the green marquee stretched out over a corner of the big yard of Rondo's house in Borodale. Metal and bamboo chairs were arranged haphazardly round the huge fire that had been kept going for almost a week now. Rondo had not been there when the accident occurred, but his mind had been repeatedly going over what he imagined could have happened that day. He could see his father-in-law, Basil Mizamane, singing his song to the two girls, the one that he had been singing earlier that day at home. Rondo, just as he had joined in to accompany the old man Mutukudzi, was also one of his favorite musicians. He could hear his children singing Todini, Senzini, What Shall We Do? He imagined a lot of laughter in the car, the old man so involved in singing and the joy of being with his granddaughters that he forgot to pay attention to what was on the road. Or he thought it through again. Rondo still could not let his children see what was going to happen to them in the next few seconds. Only the old man saw it too late, and his Mazoe Siripur did not register on the children's minds. Or so Rondo wanted to think. He could not bear to imagine what would have gone through the children's minds if they had seen it coming towards them. Probably it is just possible that they did see it, but could not understand what it meant. It is also possible that they might even have cheered the behemoth coming towards them, towering above them, his side of it moving inexorably so. Rondo wanted to think might just have made them unaware of its destiny. So, after all, they just might have died happily or, at least, obliviously. Rondo was trying to erase the pain, trying to come to terms with it as it coursed through him again and again. He was sitting on the same sofa he had sat on for the past week, chin lodged in the heart-shaped cup of his hands. He had only left the sofa at the insistence of his workmate, Gaston, who, under the pretext of buying groceries for the mourners, was really trying to take Rondo's mind off things a bit. For the whole week he had been hearing the low, continuous buzz of murmuring voices, broken now and again by the keening and wailing of some female new arrivals as the mourners came in and went out of the tent, sitting with them, the bereaved family, or leaving to attend to some urgent personal business, but always coming back again later to keep them company, to mourn with them. Of course, Rondo was not unaware that all these people came for different reasons. Some out of the genuine awareness of neighborly goodwill, some out of respect, and some, well, you could see it in the way they stared into the cameras as they shook hands with the old man, the ex-minister, Rondo's father. These photos would open doors in the future. People would be remembered. Rondo had seen the crowds milling all over the place. He had heard their voices, low and consoling, but sometimes also loud and laughing, seemingly having forgotten why they were gathered at this house. These loud voices seemed more honest than the low ones. And then he heard all the voices as one, a strong, hushed roar, wild beasts on the rampage, a distant river in flood. Only it was July, height of the cold, dry season. Some voices had found lodging in his mind, and he had heard and understood that they were all talking of what had happened in his home. It was not natural, they were saying. And then there were the songs. The haunting songs that the women had sung all night, every night, throughout the whole week, and that were now echoing back to him as he sat there across the fire from his father. They sat like that for some time in silence. Rondo started, as if waking from a deep sleep. He was certain that something had roused him, touched him physically, but he could not immediately tell what it was. He looked up. He turned his head right and left. He was surprised to find that his father was now sitting beside him, on his right. The thought that his father had changed places without his being aware of it scared him. He also noticed that his father's hand was resting on his knee. Despite the fire and the general warmth in the tent, Rondo felt the coldness of that hand through the thick material of his jeans, as if shards of ice had been deposited on his flesh. Your grief will pass away like dew in the morning Sunday. One day you will be grateful, glad that this has happened now and not later. You will remember me and thank me. Why, father? Rondo's mind was elsewhere. His voice sounded strange to him. They were not talking about the same thing. You will hear people talking. They will try to give you all sorts of advice. It is lies. "Don't listen to them," his father was saying, but Rondo found himself straining his ears, only to hear a silence settling down inside him, heavy as a huge stone, in that space which his children's voices would have filled. He felt his father's fingernails digging into the flesh of his knee as if he were trying to make him understand something that he could not say in words. Rondo's eyes fixed on his father's. He saw, in the older man's eyes, the glow of the dying fire. A little flame flared up, flickered, and died. Slowly, almost contemptuously, Rondo removed his father's hand from his knee. His father's eyes opened a little wider, in surprise, then quickly he gave a little sad laugh. "Nothing lives forever. You are still young. You can have other children." Without another word, the old man rose and shuffled towards the house. Rondo heard him coughing horribly. Then the cough was abruptly cut off as the door to the main building banged shut behind him. As his father entered the lit area in the veranda, Rondo had thought his shoulders looked narrower and droopier than he had remembered them. With more intensity, the thought which had begun to visit him with almost daily frequency since the accident came once more. I must have been afraid of just a shadow. His wife, Selena, might have been right after all. To admit that she might have been right, that she could possibly be right, was not a pleasant thought for him to entertain. You are always in the shadow of your father. She had even gone as far as saying, "I could do better in your pants." In the shadow of my father? He reflected again, as his thoughts grew dearer. Exactly what am I doing to myself? His mind moved on to his colleagues in the journalistic fraternity and their attitude towards him. While they did not exactly laugh at him to his face, they certainly did not take him seriously. They might have wanted to, but Rondo was one of those people who at any gathering inadvertently became a laughingstock. And the worst of it was that Rondo, feeling defenseless, would join in their laughter, as if to say, "Well, if you see me as a fool, I'll be one." In short, everyone seems to be telling Rondo to grow up, get a life, and yet... There was the scrape and squeak of a door opening. Rondo looked up and back at the house. Silhouetted in the doorway, with the light behind her so that he could not see her face, stood his wife, Selena. They looked at each other like that for a long moment, and then Rondo turned his gaze back into the fire. He realized he was expecting to hear again that squeak and scrape of the door to tell him that his wife had gone back into the house. He did not feel he could endure company at the moment. Then he heard the snap of a twig very close to him, and he looked around. It was Selena. He restrained himself from shouting at her, which would have surprised her. He had not heard her footsteps as she approached him across the thick lawn. This thought, combined with the earlier one of his father changing places, alarmed him as he realized the possibility of many things to do with life and death, that were happening to him without his being aware of them. But this thought quickly melted away when he felt gratefully the warmth of Selena's hand on his frozen shoulder. He could smell the wool of the blankets she had run from, recent sleep still lingering on her. Without looking at her, he raised his hand and laid it on top of hers on his shoulder. Then, her fingers cracking as he squeezed them in his, he was trying to say something to her that couldn't be said by word of mouth, and also trying to get from her something which was more than body warmth. He let his head rest against her belly, his skull just nudging the underside of her breast. "You have not slept a wink for the whole week," Selena said in a very low voice, as she crouched by the fire, knocking several pieces of wood together into a blaze. "I feel as if I have been asleep all my life," he said, at the same time wondering whether she understood what he meant. He sank his fingers into her dreadlocks. "I finally managed to sleep last night, thanks to your mother." Selena was silent for a moment, then she went on. "All night, every day, we sat side by side. Then last night, I suppose she saw me nodding off, and she just took my head and put it on her lap. I had not realized how exhausted I was, and how I needed a mother to hold me just like that." Another silence. Then, unexpectedly, "A great woman, your mother." Because he was thankful or confused, Rondo said, "And my father?" Selena tensed. "What do you mean?" "Oh, nothing." Now he was, as always, on the defensive. Of course, he did not mean nothing. What he really wanted to know was what his wife really thought about his father. So far, she hadn't said anything at all about anything, not since the accident in which her own father and his and her own children had perished. It exasperated him that she always seemed to hold herself above everybody else, as if passing judgment on them and him weaker mortals. Subconsciously, what irked him was that she had not said anything good, bad, or indifferent, nothing that would at least indicate a direction for him to take. Although he might not have known it throughout their life together, he now seemed to have an inkling that she had always made all the decisions. A fact which had been quickly commented and acted on by his father. Now, how he was to handle his father largely depended on what she, Selena, said about the old man. But now she was behaving as if Rondo wondered if she knew. He could not tell with his wife. Or possibly his own mother would have told her they were inseparable, his wife and his mother. The two of them always knew how to get information. Rondo had always been surprised he would burst into his or his mother's house with what he thought was something neither of them would have heard. But the thing about them was that they would not embarrass you by letting you know the news was old hat. They would look kindly at you, and from that look, you would know that they had been hiding the information from you for the past month or even a year. They preferred not to offer news. Very strange, Rondo said to Selena. What? This accident. Selena stiffened. Then she turned her head slowly away from the fire and looked at him. She stood up, took both his hands in hers and gently pulled him up. Come on, you need rest. Let's get you some sleep and then I will prepare you a big breakfast. I can't remember when I last cooked you something since we started employing a housemaid. Come on, I don't want to lose you as well. Love me? To the maid? But she suddenly let go of his hands as if she had remembered something else she would rather forget. She put her face into her hands and gave one big heave of the shoulders. Rondo put his arm round those shoulders. I think I'll accompany Papa's body to Bulawayo tomorrow, she said, after she had stopped crying. We will go together. No. Why? Are you blaming? No, 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 no. She did not quite scream, but she put her hand to Rondo's mouth and then rushed off across the lawn and into the house, crashing the door shut behind her, saying, No Mick Jaggers or John Lennons in my house. Scum. They have no sense of responsibility, no principle. Flowers of the Sunday playing and singing on trains with no destination in mind. Railway followers. Ch, 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 ch. Rolling Stones. No son of mine has ever been a Rolling Stone. He had been only a child, and he did not have any idea who Mick Jagger or John were. But he had remembered the fear that had been planted in him then. He had peed his shorts, he had told Selena. And he had told her all this because he loved her, and he was about to lose her because his father, a full-blown Ishe, Makwasha Makuru, would not let the Rwafa family be cheapened by an off-course son who wanted to marry into an ignominious Mudzaviti family. And he could have lost her if she had not stood by him. She, her father, and his own mother. The flames of that burning guitar had gutted all the courage out of him. It had always brought tears to his eyes to see his mother and wife together while his father frowned and even spat at the relationship. And throughout, Rondo did not know what was behind all this tension in their relationships. Once, his mother tried to simplify it for him. Your father is a Zazuru, Karanga, and, once upon a time, they were raided by the Madziti, Nebele. Well, in those days, or even in these days, if you have a war, you have a war. It does bad things to people's minds, so they will always remember the pain of the scars rather than the relief of the healing. Your father, Mwananangu, is one bombed-out battlefield of scars. And his deepest scar is that he cannot forgive, not just his enemies, you, me, anyone. It had not meant anything to him then, but it had been easier to accept then. Well, my son, give me a grandson, to whom I can leave all this. All this was, Rondo thought, his cars, houses, and money. In a way, each of them lived locked in their separate cages. Rondo always thought his father must be right. He was too diminished to think otherwise, and he was afraid for his mother whenever she had to oppose the old man. He loved or thought he loved his father, but the topic was too charged to consider deeply. Maybe he loved him because he always did everything for him. His mother did a lot too, the more intimate things like underwear and peanut butter, but his father was out and up there with Batman and Superman. Yet he could not tell in exactly what sense. And Selena? It seemed the first time she came into their house, she had understood the whole situation. Rondo's father had asked, "Who are her people?" And the moment Rondo told him, his father had walked out. He had stayed out of sight for the whole day, yet Selena later told him it was the most enjoyable day she had ever had in her life. From day one, Selena had, so it seemed to Rondo, taken to his mother like her own, or like an old friend. Rondo loves both his mother and his wife, but now he is wondering whether they too are not laughing at him, like his colleagues at work. Rondo Rwafa knows very well that he is not a brilliant journalist. In fact, he could not even remember how the job had come about. One morning, his father came into his room and said, "Slob, wake up. Time you earned your own keep." Slob, his father's language exactly. None of the words he used to address Rondo had any respect in them. It seemed that there would not ever be anything that his son could ever get right. And Rondo suspected that in her less "I love you" moments, Selena saw him in this same light. Less than me. Only his mother seemed to see him as whole. So Rondo had found himself at the Clarion, the city's daily paper, among people who seemed to start laughing at him the moment they set eyes on him. Yet they held him in a kind of awe. He had been presented to the office by no other than Rwafa himself. They flocked round him. They asked for favors, which, of course, they got, although at times it meant a few uncomfortable minutes in his father's office at home. Yes, his colleagues laughed at him, he knew, but now he did not know. Could it be malicious? He gave them money advances at the thin times of the month, and not a few had used his name to get something or other from finance houses, credit stores, legal firms, and so on. But was it possible that all the time they had been laughing at him? Recent events were driving Rondo's thoughts down avenues he was not accustomed to. More than mere recent events were making Rondo see something else in events that he had always taken for granted. Of his workmates, Rondo could say Gaston Shoko was the closest to him, although not quite a friend. Gaston was not very popular with the rest of the fraternity because he behaved as if he knew all the answers. Maybe, because of this, he saw the company of Rondo as the lesser of the two evils. Anyway, Gaston loved to talk and drink, and Rondo had lots of money and a guileless face. A long, long time back, Gaston had asked Rondo, "Do you know what your father does?" Rondo had shrugged the question off. A second, or another time, Gaston had asked again, "Have you ever wondered about the 2nd Street accidents?" And again, Rondo had shrugged his shoulders. "Do you even know what they are?" Gaston asked. "No, what are they?" Gaston had laughed. Rondo would always be a naive down. Rondo had laughed because he did not know, and he did not think it mattered. Now, after this accident, thinking things over, Rondo had a better idea of what Gaston had often tried to tell him. And Gaston more than confirmed it when, on one of their several trips in the past week to buy food and firewood for the mourners, he said, "This is your story. It would be a betrayal if we wrote it up since it involves a colleague." Silence. Then, looking at Rondo, he said slowly and conclusively, "This is a typical 2nd Street accident." Rondo stared at Gaston like a trapped animal. He felt terror, and in that moment accepted that he had always refused to think about why his father left the house in the morning and what he did before he returned in the evenings, or the following week for that matter. Gaston observed his friend quietly. There would never have been a good moment. He put his hand on Rondo's shoulder. "You can't be a child forever, Rondo." They walked slowly to the car and drove back to Borodale in silence. Gaston stopped the vehicle. Rondo sat motionless in the passenger seat. His friend looked at him for a moment and said quietly, "We're home, Rondo." Then, as Gaston began unpacking the goods from the boot, he said, "In case you need it, there's a gun in the glove locker. It's loaded." Rondo had not been used to living his life from deductive or logical thinking, but now, the accumulation of events and the history behind them had made him so numb, he was almost a zombie. And Gaston would not leave him alone. According to Gaston, this whole story had to be seen from the point of view of Rondo's father. "What happened at the birthday party?" Gaston had asked. Rondo could not see anything wrong with the party except that two old men, his father and father-in-law, had made speeches that seemed to have turned sour. His mind seemed at times to have an amazing way of getting rid of the details of an experience. "No," Gaston had said. Only one old man made a speech. And that broke up the party, didn't it, Rondo? Don't you remember that? And Rondo remembered. He even remembered other incidents that Gaston did not know anything about. Rondo recalled what had happened at the birthday party. The day before the party, there had been a quarrel? A misunderstanding? Between his father and father-in-law. There had always been a tension between the two men, but the episode at the party had rendered it dramatic. Although he thought he loved his own father, Rondo had always sensed that if he had to choose, he would pick out his father-in-law as his father. It was just a feeling, not defined, not absolute. Nothing about his father-in-law's demeanor showed that he was a very successful businessman and the MP of a constituency in northern Matabeleland. When he was with his father-in-law, Rondo always felt that the space around him had expanded. He did not know exactly how to put it, but he felt he could and he would be allowed to do anything he wanted. Only on very rare occasions had Mr. Mezamain mentioned his differences with Rondo's father, and even then he would conclude, of course, he is free to think as he likes. So, at one point in their married life, Selena suggested that they invite every relative and friend for a joint birthday celebration for their daughters, Yuna, 6, and Rhoda, 5. Mr. Mizamane had married again after Selena's mother had died, and Selena did not yet feel comfortable with her stepmother. So, in the invitation to her father, she had alluded to this. She knew that her father would understand, and he did. He came alone. He also came a few days before the celebrations as he had business to conduct in Harare. Mr. Rwafa surprisingly drove to Rondo's home to see Mr. Mezamane on the morning after his arrival. He seemed quite cheerful, which was also very unusual in Rondo and Selena's house, but more especially in the presence of Basil Mezaman. Not least because the bill for the couple's wedding celebrations had been met by Mr. Mezamane. The larger part of the expenses anyway. Rondo's mother had helped too, in tears at times, because her husband had told her, "Who did you say is wedding?" and had conveniently left town on state business for 2 weeks. Selena could not believe that this was just a courtesy call, a friendly gesture towards her father. However, the ostensible purpose of this surprising visit was not kept secret for long. As with other high-ranking officials in the ruling party, Rondo's father had his eye on a certain farm in the Rua area, which was presently owned by a white man, a Mr. Quayle. Rondo had driven to the farm on several occasions because he had a natural love for the outdoors, the trees, the hills, the open vistas. On the first occasion, he had gone out to the farm with his father. Subsequently, Selena had accompanied him. She seemed to like the Quayles too. Indeed, they seemed very nice people. Each time he visited the farm, they presented him with some of their farm produce, milk, honey, apples, whatever was in season. They had to force the bounty on him since he was too shy and embarrassed to receive gifts from people. Rondo learned from Mr. Quayle that the relationship between him and his father went years back, when we worked together in a bookshop in town. But it's now mostly sustained by our passion for duck shooting. Rondo had not bothered to find out anything more from his father about this relationship. He did not even speculate on the possibilities that it could go beyond just duck shooting. "Ever shot duck, Mr. Mizamane?" Rondo's father asked Rondo's father-in-law that day before the birthday celebrations. "No. Why?" "Because I'd like you to watch some duck shooting today." "Sad you can't shoot yourself. It would have been more fun. One can always learn," Mr. Mezamain said. "Isn't it a bit late in the day for you?" Mr. Basil Mezamane had laughed his uproarious laugh and said something that had made Rondo laugh as well, but Mr. Rwafa seemed to disapprove. He was a man who laughed little. They drove out towards Rua in Mr. Rwafa's Pajero. Rondo had wanted to sit alone in the back, to give the two elderly men a chance to talk same-age boys stuff, but Mr. Mezamain had declined to do so, saying, "I suffer from vertigo." Rondo had had to sit in front with his father, wondering what vertigo had to do with anything. At the Mavuku turnoff, they found an open truck parked by the roadside. It was full of youths, singing chimarenga songs and waving ugly-looking clubs. Some even had bows and arrows and spears. Immediately they passed the truck. It fell in, right behind their own car. "Your duck shooting posse?" Mr. Mezamane asked. Rondo laughed. He had not thought about it at all. "Damn right," Mr. Rwafa had replied, and Rondo stopped laughing at the chilly tone of his father's voice. They must be pretty good marksmen to hit flying ducks with those clubs. Not at all. We hunt sitting ducks. Mr. Manzamane gave another of his uproarious laughs, saying, "That's pretty good. I must tell this to Radhebe." There was no more talk in the car, but, looking behind him, Rondo wondered whether his father had not been telling the truth after all. The truck was still behind them. When they stopped for some drinks at Rua, it stopped at some distance on the road ahead, and it fell in behind them again when they passed it. As they turned off the main Mutare road to the farm, the truck also turned off. "Now, tell me, is this just coincidence or what?" Mr. Mazamane seemed a little too happy with fear or just worry. "Don't let your heart trouble you," Mr. Rawala said. It did not even think that the youths would follow. Mr. Rawala said not much about the truck trailing behind them, with its load of singing, yelling, slogan-chanting youths. He was preoccupied by the sudden beauty of the minds they would not register it, or were fermenting with thoughts of what they were going to do wherever they were going. As they drew closer to the farms, the singing, chanting almost, grew louder, more intense, menacing. It was no longer just orderly. Now it was more menacing. It was a riot of sound with different kinds of songs, although in peacetime the riot of sound with different kinds of songs, although in peacetime the riot of the singing. He had been brought up on these songs, all that the youths were using, which he would be different, and he found himself wishing that the youths were using peacetime words. Right now, right here where they were just leaving an area of bush, mwangaza, Rondo, musi, and an assortment of wild fruit trees and coming into the open. As the valley towards the river, the land provided a breathtaking view of its immensity. Across the river, the land rose with beautiful hills. On this land, mountains in the blue distance. It was just after midday, but the weather was cool and wet. It had been hot, it seemed subdued, and the air acquired the dark color of old memories. Rondo, he had forgotten or unknown memory, rather than a remembered reality. His nostrils were filled with the smell of fresh water. Soon they were rolling down to the stream, with very little water in its bed, and crossed a narrow concrete and stone bridge into the scrub on a low hill. They kept on driving up, then round a bend in the road, almost a blind turn, and there they came upon a jeep stalled into the side of the road. Its hood was open and a white woman was bent under it, looking into the engine. She looked up as Rondo and company came to a noisy, dusty halt beside her car. The lorry with the chanting youths pulled up behind Mr. Rawala's car. The woman stood, frozen, her dirty hands gripping a greasy spanner. There was a moment of silence as the woman looked at the men in both vehicles and the men looked back at her. For a few painful moments, neither side seemed to know what to do with the other. Then the woman brought down the hood of the Jeep with a loud bang, moved quickly to the open door of the Jeep, reached in and pulled out a rifle. The youths in the truck jumped out at that moment and advanced towards her. Rondo had not heard the sound of the door open nor Mr. Mazaman getting out, but suddenly there he was, standing with his hands raised, the woman behind him and the mob before him. They all froze. Mr. Mazaman spoke in a calm, fatherly voice. "Let us all remember we are human. This lady probably needs our help. Even so, if there is something you had planned to do, I don't want to be a witness to it, because I am not part of your plans. I am a stranger to this whole conspiracy. Is this how you treat visitors and your real people here? Would you like me to tell the people where I come from that this is how you treat people here?" There was a stunned silence and a slight tremor of knob carries being lowered by a degree or two. Then an impatient voice rang. "Chief, who is this man?" All eyes turned on the young man. That was when Rondo realized that his father had sneaked out of the car and disappeared. Quickly, Mr. Mizamane assessed the situation and said, "You see? He gave me word that he had excelled and came here. He is going to contact you. I am his father to comrade. We are in the same work as you see." For no reason that Rondo could see, all the men lowered their clubs and got back onto the truck grumbling. They drove off. "Thank you," the woman said, but she continued to clutch her rifle, and that was when Rondo recognized her. "What seems to be the trouble with the car?" Mr. Manzamane asked. It just ceased. Rondo felt that he should have done something to help, and because he had not, he kept his head very low out of embarrassment. Mr. Mizamane opened the hood of the Jeep and fiddled with the engine and said, "Try her, let's see." The woman thanked Mr. Mizamane profusely. She gave him her name. Mr. Mizamane said it did not matter. He asked if they had time so that they could drive to the farm. I was not far for a cup of tea. Mr. Mizamane joked, saying they got to some other mischief. The up with the singing boys in the truck before they got up with her instead. Woman thanked him again and said that if in future he was ever in that area, he should drop in for a cup of tea. Or he could make an appointment with her husband for duck shooting. She gave a small laugh, thanked him again, and drove off. Less than 2 minutes after the woman had driven off, Rondo's father appeared from behind a bush. He did not say a thing. He got behind the wheel and they drove back the way they had come. About 30 minutes of total silence in the car seemed unbearable to Rondo. Also, he felt terribly oppressed and morally bound to say what was bothering him. One of those very rare occasions when fear of his father was less than the pain inside him. That was Mrs. Quayle back there, Rondo said. Is she your mother? His father snapped. Do you know her? Mr. Mizamane asked. Rondo looked furtively at his father. Mr. Rala concentrated on his driving. I am asking you, Rondo, Mr. Mizamane said. We often think that because a person is loud-mouthed, laughing, nothing to worry about, Rondo. They are, at least he seemed to be a good neighbor. You heard his traitors, Mr. Rawala spat the word out, invite. Don't I'm sure you too have had tea with her or them? Shut up, traitor, Mr. Rawala shouted, his voice icy, and he rammed his foot on the brakes of the Pajero, and they were off again. Rondo would not have tried to see what lay behind this incident if Gaston had not asked him to remember what happened at the birthday party. And what had happened at the party? It had turned out to be a great party, at least at the beginning. No one paid attention at first to the two elderly men, the politicians, who were quite conspicuous by their stepping as far apart as possible. If you did not know, you would not notice the tension behind the groups of seemingly happy delegates. But the tension was there. It was so thick you could almost cut it with a knife. The delegates who had formed into 2 rows behind them, Basil Mezzanine had won the toss, managed to raise some eyebrows when he referred to Mr. Rwafa as the Honorable MP. There seemed, at least to an innocent ear, no innuendo of sarcasm or irony in his voice. A number of people were so moved that they observed a few seconds of silence, a moment which seemed to last a long time. It was as if a spell had been cast in the entire area, an aura of peace. There was a point, Mr. Rwafa, and it revealed a rare sense of calm, and Rondo even allowed themselves to think that this was what they had wanted all along. A moment like this with their parents, all their parents, Rondo felt the party had served its purpose. But then, out of the blue, Selena said, Mr. Mimi, this age? Why, probably one of the dreadlocked crop of outsiders felt this was the right time to interrupt. I don't believe that you had it in you, Rondo's hand, but something was called Mr. Rwafa. Mr. Minister in deference to his past glory, if we weren't ready to laugh or caught in his throat when a gun appeared. Tell you about what you did in the liberation struggle at this point. But nobody did. He didn't seem to want to do so either. What they saw on the screen, something should really have stopped. Feeling that he had to have a boy, when he was just an ordinary old man. And Rondo later remembered the day he had allowed to do, and yet the very thought, and embarked on something that had not done anything wrong in the first place. Embarked on some foolish but his father who never showed any courage, Mr. Rwafa made all the children sit cross-legged at his feet. Rondo and his friends, his father's eyes opened wide, still, and a great flood of sadness washed through, made themselves comfortable in sofas, legs crossed, beers in hand, forming a protective hymn. He took the gun out of Rondo's hand and pointed it at his head. Just a moment earlier there, he took the gun out of Rondo's hand and pointed it at his head. Just a protective outer circle around their children. Numbness. Face to face, and he had been a rock for all that he felt. It was not courage, just a numbness. Stupidly, his workmates or friends would have said, he understood him. That Mr. Rwafa talked of betrayals, enemies of the state, enemies of the clan, of the family. Looters, and somewhere inside him, a deep wish emerged that his father should always take care cattle thieves, baby snatchers. He talked of his achievements. He said the main thing for them of the things of his life. He would be taking care of things as he had always taken care to remember was that No son of the Rwafa family would ever play second fiddle to of simplicity matters. I haven't used a gun before, Rondo said calmly. I thought you'd do this thing better than me. After all, this is the story of your life. Slowly, his father put the gun on the floor, reached inside his jacket, and took out his own service pistol. Rondo watched all this as if it were happening on the screen. Then, unexpectedly, his father hissed, "You two get out of here and shut the door." Rondo obeyed, and as he turned, he saw Selena in the doorway with a gun. She did not resist when Rondo pushed her out gently, closing the door softly behind them. The sound came as a soft, muffled plop. But Rondo was looking at the gun in Selena's hand. She read his thoughts and said, "Your mother gave it to me." Rondo bent his head in silence.